Well, Phil, once again, I was right. I was completely right. I was unimpeachably right. Not a single thing amiss.
This tends to happen.
And naturally, I mean, I was right that Mazatlan was going to beat Cruz Azul,
Mm.
which was the most prominent thing that I was calling as definitely 100% happening. So we are headed for a possible Leagues Cup final of Mazatlan versus Club America, which is not Don Garber's nightmare because Club America will sell the place out, even though Mazatlan will not. If there is a nightmare scenario for Garber, it would probably be Colorado versus Mazatlan.
Which is the 45th against the 46th seed, which is my dream scenario
Yes,
at this point right now.
your
That's what I
your
want to see
dreams,
happen.
his nightmares. We've got a quarterfinal matchup between Seattle and LAFC. Wait a minute, is that a semifinal matchup? No, that's U.S. Open Cup. That's a different cup entirely, in which Seattle and LAFC will play one another, not at Lumen Field, not at BMO Stadium, but in Tukwila, Washington, home
Starfire, baby.
home of the Tacoma Defiance. Uh,
Starfire Soccer Complex. One of the most hallowed grounds in American soccer history. It's incredible. Tequila is actually the town where the mall was that I went to in high school, where I had a job at Benetton for 4 days, setting a Benetton up, and then they realized that I was not Benetton material, and they quickly found an excuse to fire me.
see you. We don't see you. You're
So
not wearing a colorful sweater here.
I am not. So if you ever go by Tequila, Washington, if you find yourself near Starfire, you can also go to South Center and relive part of my youth.
Well, Phil, Leagues Cup is giving people the rare opportunity to see Seattle play LAFC, something that they don't get nearly enough of an opportunity to see. And you know what other rare matchup? Columbus versus NYCFC. Also, not something that people see in the regular season
Not
already.
at all. Not at all.
Wow. People are just clamoring for these $30 tickets. Boy, the stadiums are so tremendously empty, but full of passion and love and allegedly sponsor money. It could have been Columbus Tigres. It could have been so many actually interesting things. We could have had a quarterfinal matchup of Mazatlan and Tigres. I feel like as much hay as was made last year about Austin going out against Mazatlan and Juarez. Sure, yeah, Juarez then went to LA and got trounced 7-1. But those underdog teams in Liga MX, when they have something to prove, they show up, and that is what has gotten Mazatlan further into the knockout rounds than people have assumed. They are on a giant killing agenda, and they have played against these teams. They had played against Cruz Azul in their regular season in advance of this cup competition, and they showed up ready to play. And Mazatlan, who'da thunk? I'd thunk.
Mazatlan was playing Cruz Azul. Cruz Azul tied that up, got it to penalties, which you think would favor Cruz Azul. But as you may know, there is a verb, Cruz Azuliar, which means to fail spectacularly when you think you're going to actually win something. So it's a Spanish translation for spursing, I believe.
Yes, I think that is the accurate corollary. Now that Tigres is out, people are going to miss out on any future nahueladas, another coined term. This in this case based on Tigres' goalkeeper
Mm,
Nahuel, our close-up Magic King. The
mhm.
Magic has left Leagues
Yeah.
Cup. Many people are out there saying it could be no Liga MX teams in the semifinals, no Liga MX teams in the final. People have been misnaming it League Cup for a while, just as a malapropism. It's hard to say one letter, really, but also it's a brand new thing, and I don't know that they've done the best job of branding. It's yeah, it's another cup, League Cup. Yeah, okay. So in the League Cup, blah blah blah. Okay, yeah, great. But it's looking more and more like League Singular Cup. How do you rate this year versus last year? Is the future rosy and bright for the magical, mysterious, greatest cup competition since Copa Tejas?
Last year we had obviously Messi, and this was his coming out party. We have a lot of good games still. The scheduling has been really odd on this. So there are these round of 16 games on Monday and Tuesday, right? You would expect maybe 4 and 4. Nope. Monday is strictly a Puma Seattle match that starts at 9:30 Central Time, and then 7 matches on Tuesday. And there was some really amazing soccer going on, but not that many people in the stands. I don't imagine that many people really tuning in, save for the fans of those teams, and maybe not even in that case, right? I think compared, and we'll see, hopefully we'll see numbers, maybe we'll see numbers, maybe numbers will be hidden, but I'm curious to know where this stacks up last year, attendance wise, viewership wise. The vibes are down. The vibes are
Yeah.
not what they were last year. And that's understandable given Messi Mania and all that. But I think the only way to get the vibes back would be Colorado Mazatlan in the finals.
Yeah, I was really pulling for Toluca Mazatlan because it no MLS team in the final, and it being Toluca and Mazatlan that don't have big traveling fan contingents or
Mhm,
large native fan contingents like Club America has, like Rayados have, the
mhm.
other mega clubs that have huge fan bases in the States.
Where would you put that
You
even?
mentioned I don't know. Dignity Health Park. I don't know. Yeah, Tukwila, good old Starfire. Why not? But you mentioned the scheduling Monday and Tuesday. On the one hand, it is a great tech demo for my favorite feature of my Apple TV 4K box, which is the multi-view feature. Lets you watch
Mhm,
multiple games at once. I think of it as MLS 360 without the talking heads, and you're the control room. And it was absolutely glorious on Tuesday night to be able to live flip between different games flawlessly, just a minimum of effort. And it was a great way, while various games were actually boring for a bit, not a whole lot was happening. Then things suddenly got interesting. Guess what? Then I can switch over to this one game because it looks like a fight's going to break out, and oh, maybe there's a review, and I can back it up a few seconds, and then I've still got the other games going. And then something interesting happens for 5 seconds, and oh, look, oh no, it looks like indeed Miami is getting eliminated by the Crew. Wilfred Nancy magic working once again. That was honestly the best part of that Monday, Tuesday night thing,
mhm.
and everything being stacked on top of each other was that when things were boring, it wasn't ever terribly boring because I always had something going on. There isn't a lot of interest in following the competition as a whole once your team is out. Miami fans don't care about this now. They're not going to follow this just to see who wins like a World Cup once their team goes out. And that's the way that they've been marketing this thing is, oh, it's a World Cup style thing for North America, and it's just another opportunity to see these teams play. I guess the Austin angle of this, as I said the night of the Austin LAFC game, was if the tactic, and I don't have to like it, if the tactic was lose this game, win the regular season game, because that one matters more, because that's the one that the coach's job is much more contingent on, then okay, I can see going win the regular season game, lose this one with a questionable lineup formation, set of tactics, and everything. But it was underwhelming coming out of the momentum that Austin had coming out of the early rounds, where you're looking at a competition that is fundamentally much more interesting for Austin viewers than it had been. And now all of a sudden, no, it's Austin versus LAFC, a thing that, gosh, we've seen that a couple of times, haven't we?
Yeah, but we did get to see something we never see. Denny Blanca goal.
Emergency podcast. Better did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, hell yeah, shut up, hell yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, a hearty hello to you, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast, where we talk about all the Austin FC emergencies. Clearly, no emergencies in the last week or so. Skipped last week's recording after Austin's loss to LAFC. We're back now, obviously, gearing up for, we assume there's some kind of behind closed doors match this weekend. And then, obviously, the regular season starts up again, 9 games to glory or not, the push to the playoffs. So that is what's going on. Of course, I'm Phil West and bring this to you with Moisés Chiullán every week except last week. How are you doing? How's your mini
I'm
vacation
good.
from the podcast?
Here's the thing. Strange things happen during Leagues Cup, all kinds of bizarre scheduling things that can't be anticipated. Time works a little differently. It flows a
Mhm.
little bit sideways. And that's just us figuring out our schedule as we have it figured out for us by weird, underwhelming results of a weird, underwhelming tournament that could be a whole lot more interesting and entertaining Phil, I guess the behind closed doors opponent won't be NYCFC because they're still in Leagues Cup. Austin
Exactly,
FC
which is what it
behind
was
closed
last year.
doors
Yeah,
pal.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're behind closed doors pal NYCFC, whether it's preseason, both teams being out of Leagues Cup. City Football Group is going to make sure to play Austin FC and give them maybe something that none of us ever get to see
Well,
and
except for
make
last
any
month
judgments on.
when they
Except
played.
for last month when they played in full public view to thrilling effect.
When
Yeah, so
Josh
here
Wolf's
we are.
2024 really started.
The beginning of the real 2024 season
Right.
is these 9 games, and it's only these 9 games. Nothing else really mattered. What's that favorite old canard? MLS. Nothing matters until September.
Right. Except for July when Austin started
Except for
getting
July.
good. All right, let's
Except
go
for
ahead.
July.
We've been the cold open. Also used part of our first segment. We were going to talk about Leagues Cup and just what we think of the tournament overall. But in case you are still interested in Leagues Cup and the soccer it offers, because again, Monday and Tuesday, I would say Tuesday. Monday was not a terrific game and went fairly late, and probably none of you saw it. But Tuesday definitely had some moments. Saturday, it's a staggered schedule. If you want, you could theoretically watch nothing but Leagues Cup, MLS versus MLS and MLS versus Liga MX soccer from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. It'll be, of course, as you mentioned, the very rare Columbus NYCFC matchup at 5, and then Philly Mazatlan at 6:30, Seattle LAFC at 7, and then America Colorado at 9. So again, yes, the Mazatlan Colorado dream is still alive, but it's going to be contingent on Mazatlan and Colorado respectively beating 2 teams that have looked pretty good through the tournament.
The Liga MX involved games are the 2 that I'm actually interested in watching on Saturday night.
Right.
The other 2 are also happening and their results matter, sure. But if Mazatlan upset Philly, which is what that would be, very much story of the tournament would be this Cinderella story for Mazatlan. If somehow Club America doesn't absolutely flatten Colorado, I don't know what to tell you. Terrible things will happen if Club America loses that game. Liga MX will be upended. Who knows what will happen?
Right.
Columbus NYC, Seattle LAFC. I'm sure that both games will be played very well. I am favoring LAFC and Columbus in those 2 games. I'm letting it ride as a non-betting better that Philly is going to come out not on the winning side of that game against Mazatlan. I think Mazatlan has the interest and the incentive to get their players those bonuses for continuing to advance in the tournament and really make a name for itself. And if there is a good thing, a silver lining that can be taken out of a competition, that not just the general scheduling of where we find ourselves in this version of it, but the fact that they don't just pad the matches out throughout the regular season, culminating in maybe just a couple weeks instead of a full month of both leagues having to take completely off and upend their schedules. That silver lining could be Mazatlan making something of a name for itself and getting to get out from under not being one of the quote unquote big clubs of Mexico as a reputation, which would be cool. Mazatlan, the billionaire moved the club despite everyone's protestation story that actually happened.
Morelia
got
before,
moved.
right? So
Yeah, they were Morelia.
And where's that in relation to Mazatlan? What kind of a move are we talking about?
We're talking about a significant amount of distance.
Okay.
The bigger part of it is trying to get actual numbers for you here. Morelia is like a little ways west of Mexico City, roughly where Mexico City is.
Sure.
Mazatlan is like all the way northwest on the coast.
Yeah, the Pacific Coast.
Yeah, Pacific Coast. It's a 9.5 hour drive. 9.5 hour drive from Morelia to Mazatlan.
It is like akin to a Columbus to Austin move.
Yeah, I would say that is actually a reasonable comparison.
We're not on the Pacific Coast, but in terms of kind of culture, different part of the country.
For people not well versed in Mexican geography, you have to go through Guadalajara to get to Mazatlan. Like you're crossing like all the way practically to the nook between Baja California and the main chunk of Mexico that is Mexico. It was not an insignificant move. And Morelia, not as economically advantaged of an area as other major city centers across
Gotcha.
Mexico.
Yeah.
So it's save Morelia. There wasn't the money being passed around in a hat to make it happen. Will they at some point do throwback jerseys or something like that, MLS style, really twisting the knife in Morelia fans? Who knows? I followed Liga MX growing up, not super close because I'm not Mexican American, I'm Cuban, but the fan bases are deeply passionate and are generational fan bases, based
Sure.
on
Yeah.
where people are from. People don't change the jersey depending on where they move. If they move from one side of the country to Austin and suddenly become Austin fans, not a thing in Mexico, really. You're that until forever. My question is whether there is actually that much of a Mazatlan fan base in Mazatlan, or if it's a tax shelter for its billionaire owner and it's a neat looking crest and that kind of thing. I don't know. This is probably more talking about Mazatlan than anybody actually wanted.
But they become your
But
team.
yeah, they've become my team, if because in college there was a really great Mexican restaurant in a little town just outside of Tallahassee that they were from Morelia, and they had Morelia soccer gear, and they had
Mhm.
a particularly nice cap, which I should be wearing on the recording right now, but it's buried in my closet. I should have dug it out.
Right.
And I was like, oh, it's cool. It's got an M on it. My name starts with an M. I never picked a Liga MX team. I love them all. I get to
It picked
claim the
you.
entire. They picked me. I am a fan of League. I'm just gonna get a Liga MX hat, do the full Rob Lowe like I do with
Yep.
MLS Next Pro. I am a fan of
Yeah. Do
League.
it. Do it. Do it.
But yeah, so I bought that hat, and that is the one piece of Morelia ephemera. Actually, the only piece of Liga MX merch that I own, because every time I go, oh, do I want to get a Santos jersey or do I want to get a this jersey? They're all plastered with that Caliente betting site sponsor. So many of them have 17 different sponsors plastered all over.
Exactly.
Once you buy a jersey, then you're pot committed to that club. And
Mhm.
I feel like I can't do that because I'm just a fan of League.
Yeah. I have a Tigres jersey, but yeah, I'm a walking billboard whenever I put that on. It's
Yeah.
also bright yellow, which is not the color I would have gravitated towards necessarily. When you have a French player and when you have a goalkeeper that turned out to be even more spectacular than you thought he was initially, then you gravitate towards that team.
Speaking of French players, so maybe the story of this League's Cup, maybe it'll end up being it's Olivier Giroud. He did okay in the game he just played in, but I don't know, man. I watched him in Serie A. Everybody's Giroud's coming to MLS. I'm like, maybe he'll pull off a bail and have one incredibly crucial play that only he just manages to pull off in an MLS Cup
Mhm.
run or something like that. Maybe that'll be it. The only related possible narrative that I feel like we could see that I wanted to bring up is that US Open Cup thing that I mentioned.
Right.
LAFC could win that treble. They could win Leagues Cup, MLS Cup, and Open Cup,
Yeah.
um, as could Seattle. Both of those teams. It depends on how that quarterfinal goes on Saturday night and then how the semifinal they have against each other 3 days after the end of Leagues Cup goes. Does anybody care about the North American treble? I don't know.
On the other side of the bracket, Open Cup wise, it's amazingly Sporting KC and Indy 11. So
Yeah.
yeah, Columbus can't win a treble. Some of the other contenders, Cincinnati can't win a treble because they've been knocked out. On the theme of strikers that have found different teams, the reason for Atlanta fans to hate watch Cruz Azul has now been totally wrapped up by Mazatlan winning. The last taker in the PK sequence between Cruz Azul and Mazatlan, who hit the post with his attempt, was Georgios Giakoumakis.
Watching him in that game, it was watching a giant pile of money on fire. That's what watching that game was. It was, so this guy was worth all that money, huh? He learned the system that fast, huh? I have doubts.
So, will you be watching the rest of Leagues Cup?
Yeah, I'm going to watch it. It is part of the overall league narrative, and one of the things that I do, not with every single game for every single opponent, but I was paying particular attention to opponents that Austin is set to play against in their remaining 9 league matches.
Most of whom
Where
now
I
are
was
out.
Most of whom are now out, but I watched Nashville's last match and Vancouver's and Toronto's, and if it turns out that LAFC end up going to the final of this thing and they
Mhm.
also go to the final of US Open Cup,
Yeah.
then that stacks them up with more games to play
Mhm.
before Austin go to LAFC in the middle of September to presumptively lose. But if they end up doing something real wild and they pull out a 4-2-3-1 or something, they take a note from Mauricio Pochettino's notebook and do some really advanced pressing or something. Maybe LAFC going all the way to the final of two different cups right before having to play Austin at home will result in it's just Austin. We can rest Belonga. We can rest Giroux. We can rest this guy. We can put in a substitute goalkeeper and give Lloris the day off. Maybe that has an effect.
The US Open Cup final would be on the 25th, and then LAFC is actually playing
Yep. That's the week
the
before
Wednesday
then.
before. Yeah, on the 18th.
They'll rest their starters to save them for the cup, Phil. That's what it is.
That's what that's what I'm wondering. Yeah. Are they going to rotate? Are
Are
they
they
going
going to rotate?
to
Because it's a
not?
midweek game,
Right.
right?
Yeah. They'll probably rotate anyway to a certain degree, but would they factor that in given that, yeah, in a week they are going to be playing for a trophy? Not the trophy that they maybe necessarily want to get if they've
Yeah.
already got Leagues Cup at that point and they're aiming for MLS Cup. Clearly, Open Cup won't probably be as much of a priority. But again, this kind of goes back to what does it mean? What is the significance of Open Cup in 2024, given all the kind of league-wide efforts to downsize its importance, I guess you could say. Does it still matter? Is it still going to have that kind of resonance, especially if it's weirdly like against Indy 11 or something like that? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it could be SKC, but SKC hasn't been great this year either. It's going to be one of those two teams.
The other thing in the back of my head about Open Cup is I think it's interesting that Apple picked up the remaining knockout round
Mhm.
broadcast rights to
Yep.
it. Um, and it feels to me like a statement from the broadcast rights holder for MLS of,
Mhm.
hey, yeah, Open Cup is a thing that should exist and it's a thing that should receive support. And we don't care what the commissioner of the league that we are in business with says. We believe those rights matter. I think that is the kind of thumb on a scale that I like to see from Apple, even though they're doing other things that I'm not a fan of and belong on a tech podcast. But as regards soccer, I think I think Apple is interested in having big crowds and having interesting stories to tell, and that comes into how you see the camera angles being dictated during these Leagues Cup games that are incredibly empty. Not just the Liga MX versus Liga MX games, but games that are matchups of great teams, great soccer being played, but just phenomenally empty stands.
Mhm.
And not even just, oh, the upper deck isn't full, but it looks real sparse. They have one entire north end or south end completely shut off. It is not looking like a very exciting cup competition in the round of 16, which you would think that it probably should.
But there's also been so many games up to this point. It is a lot of
Yeah.
games just to get to a round of 32, and then you're still getting to a round of 32. I wonder if, again, and I know that this would be harsh because, especially the way that the groups are seated, we won't get into that discussion again. But what if it's just group winners? What if you just have group stages and then just go straight to a round of 16 and dispense with a round of 32? Does that improve things?
I don't know. I think the biggest problem is compressing the schedule into a month.
Mhm.
If changing that changes a lot of things.
Mhm.
If you if you spread the group stage out, then on the one hand, because of the Liga MX schedule, you have a fundamentally different team that is playing the group stage versus the knockout
Mhm.
stages.
Yeah.
But do people care as much about that, or they care about the brands of these teams and everything? If Leagues Cup group stage matches become cheap midweek games that happen earlier in the season, then maybe you have some growing appreciation for it as a regular thing
Right.
that
But then
is,
it's Open
oh,
Cup
it's yeah, then it's Open Cup, but if
minus the
you
USL teams
minus the USL teams, but
and the other teams in the
plus the
Premier, of
Mexican
course.
teams. Yeah, like that to me, that's the big piece of it is if you are giving people an opportunity to see the top division teams play in group stage matches that are advertised and aggressively marketed as, hey, maybe you haven't been to a match yet. Go on a Wednesday night. It'll be at a reasonable time. It'll be cheap. You can bring the whole family. Then yeah, maybe that does something to
Right.
normalize. Oh, yeah, we go to this and then we watch the rest of the games when they get expensive and all the expensive people show up. I feel like that solves a few of their problems, but doesn't solve all other problems. How do you balance it alongside Open Cup? How do you
Mhm.
balance it alongside league play and schedule congestion that happens just as a result of the league's gaining another team? And it's not like these teams are going to stop playing as many games as they already are. They're just being organized a little bit differently, with bye weeks being a little bit different now that they actually have an even number of teams across the whole league.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. There are too many variables to fix one, and it fixes everything that's busted with Leagues Cup. There is an interesting competition to be played here. Cannot happen at the expense of Open Cup. Just in terms of soccer heritage, I know MLS does it different. There's certain things you just can't do, is say, oh, we want to have a sense of history and then jettison the one piece of history that you actually have in domestic cups. You can't build history on the back of demolishing other history.
It's a difference between a tournament that started in 1914 and a tournament that started as an exhibition in 2019, with MLS
Yeah.
starting in 1996 in between those things.
People have also made a big point of not having any away matches in Mexico. That is a serious advantage for all of the MLS teams. I think if you spread that schedule out and you play some of those matches in Mexico, you can get a similar number of matches,
Yep.
even if you make it so that group stage winners are the only ones to make it out of the group and you go straight to a round of 16.
Mhm.
That to me is the most logical one if you're playing two legs. If you're playing home and away and away matches in Mexico and leaning into the full chaos. MLS teams playing in Mexico, it ain't going to be comfortable. But you've got to get the teams to agree to that. You got to get MLS to
Mhm.
agree to that. And if Liga MX and those billionaires are satisfied by all of it being played in the US, then figure out something akin to what they tried with the hub strategy this year that gives some sense of an advantage to the Mexican teams.
I think part of it is they do want to contain the tournament in the US, but and it seems like the Liga MX versus MLS high stakes matches are the ones that this tournament's really gearing towards, right? You want to
Yeah.
see an America play at Columbus. You want to see an LAFC
Yeah.
play at Tigres.
They're
Think about
playing
this.
into the US versus Mexico thing, which is a
Mhm.
whole thing,
Yeah.
as we know, and it works when that's what it is.
Yeah. So try this on for size, just an idea I
Okay.
have. So you don't have every team participate. You have the top 16 League MX teams, which I realize is most of their league, top 16 MLS teams. You do a two-leg round of 32 to start. First leg in Mexico, second leg in US. They're all League MX versus MLS matchups. You do it where if there's an aggregate tie at the end, like if Tigres beats Austin 3-2 and then Austin turns around and wins 3-2 and it's 5-5 on aggregate, then you do PKs after the 90 to settle that. And then your round of 16 and everything else is in the US. And it might be a thing where you do get an MLS versus MLS final in that kind of framework, depending on how the brackets work. But at least you have games in Mexico, you have a more streamlined tournament, you have
Yeah.
something that I think it will then get to the place where fans, I think, would be engaged and energized by the matchups that are going to happen. You're not stalling the season for a whole 3 weeks. You can probably do that within 2.5 weeks time. It'd be fun.
I like that. The way that um, seeding could work that I like is okay, base it on the previous season's performance. Those are the MLS teams that make it in. The dregs of the MLS tables, why put them in the competition? Why let them play? It is, you don't make the playoffs. You also are not going to play in Leagues Cup, which is an additional opportunity for some shared revenue or
Yeah.
something
I
like that.
would though, I would go like obviously for League MX, you go Apertura Clausura from the season.
Mhm.
I would say for MLS to see the teams, Take the last 17 games of the previous season, first 17 games of this season. That way there's like a suspense of, do we get into this thing? Do we give our fans a possibility to do a road
Yeah.
match in Mexico? There's some really, I think, interesting things that could happen with that would put the seasons on an even footing, would allow recency bias to set in versus just everything that happened 8 to 10 months ago determines what's happening now in this tournament, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense. That would be better and more energized and more condensed and more concentrated in the Chameleon Coffee kind of way versus, they're not a sponsor, by the way, but versus what we have now, which is just dragging out these interminable group matches. If I'm an SKC and I'm seeing, like, let's say Colorado and then Atlas, like Colorado, we always play Atlas, not a team that I'm particularly energized about in Kansas City. That's a wash. Whereas
Yeah.
there are other cities that are, by the seeding, just getting more energized group stages. But together with all the games, it becomes a slog by the time we get to this point where knockout games happen.
A big thing for me is put more of these games involving Mexican teams in Southern California, in Texas, in
Mhm.
areas across the South that have much larger contingents of Mexican fan bases.
Yeah, once you get in the
And
knockout rounds with the hubs, yeah.
and here, here's my bias on display as fan of league. All the Liga MX teams make it in, and only the top 18 MLS teams. So instead of 16 and 16, do 18 and 18.
Okay.
As annoying as that is, let all of the Mexican teams in, because otherwise Mazatlan wouldn't be playing, right?
Yeah, but
Right? True
I know,
champions Mazatlan.
but yeah, I don't. Then you've got to hold teams out of the round of 32 and
Yeah.
get them in later and stuff. Yeah, just I don't know. I don't.
Or you put those bottom teams in play-in
Oh yeah,
situation.
that's cool. Yeah, sure.
There.
Yeah, take the
Yeah,
bottom four
you know,
teams and they
and
play, and
shake
then
them up in a bottle
the two
together.
winners are the ones that host and then
Yeah.
come to the US. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Let's do a different kind of math now, because we've talked a lot about Leagues Cup, more than maybe some of you would like. I put up a mailbag this afternoon, and one of the first things that's in there is the question about what I think that Austin might do the rest of the season and how close they might come to either making the playoffs or missing the playoffs. I do think it's going to be tight. Austin is on 31 points right now. They have 9 matches remaining. They have played 25. So again, thinking about the Thomas Rongen line, which we have created earlier this season, if you're thinking about 45 points to get Verde to 9th place, they have to come up with 14 points out of those final 27 to do that. And I did some math and walked through all the games and saw what I thought they were going to do. And I have them not quite getting there. But Moises, you're sometimes more of a rosy optimist than I am. So what I wanted to do is just briefly walk through these 9 games, see what we think results wise, and then see what our totals come to. Just to tease it a little bit before we go into the games, I have them going 3-3-3 in their last 9 games, which would give them 12 points, which would give them a total of 43, which is going to be cutting it real close. And last year that wouldn't have done it. Portland was in 10th place with 43 points.
You call me an optimist. I'm an optimist in favor of the narrative.
Okay.
I am projecting they come back off of the break, 3-game win streak.
Okay. Let's walk through the games. Okay.
Yeah, let's walk through the games.
Okay.
So
yeah,
Nashville.
Dot. So a 3-game win streak, and then let's see what happened. Okay, Nashville. That's a win. Nashville has been
It's got to be a win.
Pretty terrible this year. Obviously, some new pieces in. BJ Callahan's pretty recently a head coach there. Still probably trying to get his stuff in order. So you agree that's a win?
Yeah, absolutely. For exactly that reason.
Okay, great.
Large traveling contingent of fans is always helpful. It doesn't always have the desired effect of the 12th man thing, but I know that there's a bunch of people going to Nashville, and these players are going to be eager to embarrass some people.
Yep. That sounds great. Okay. Vancouver. That is the next home game. That is on August 31st. I called that a draw just because Vancouver has been really good this year. Obviously, Austin fares far better against Vancouver historically at home than on the road. I don't think they have won on the road at BC Place ever in their 4-year history, but I just think there's too much going on with Vancouver right now, and they're trying to jockey for playoff positions. So I think that's a draw. But you're saying it's a
I
win.
I feel like it's going to be tight. I don't see it as some sort of like outright, flat out 4-0 drubbing or something like that.
Sure, sure.
I think it is going to go through most of regulation at a draw with some late game heroics. Thinking timeline wise, Svatok will be fully worked in by then. Buka is already basically there. He just had to get used to the officiating.
Right.
Dessler, it's like he has played for this team for 8 months already.
Mhm.
And who knows? Austin FC2 signing Grogan, they might use one of his call ups and bring him in, and he wows everybody with a hat trick, and he gets a green card and immediately gets moved up to the first team. Crazy things could happen.
Peter Grogan, by the
Go
way,
ahead.
is the 19-year-old forward from Bray Wanderers that Austin FC2 signed, which was the final signing of the transfer window, which was maybe a little bit underwhelming.
Yeah, a little bit underwhelming, but we'll get to underwhelming later. But who knows? He may be
Yeah.
not just whelming, but overwhelming. That Vancouver game, it's going to be tough. Vanny is a hell of a coach to go
Mhm.
against, putting coach versus coach. Austin is not in a position to not need to win games now that their
Mhm.
actual season has begun. As
Mhm.
I've mentioned in the past, Austin's real season began in July,
Yep.
and it's really real in August and September. I feel like they have to go real hard, harder than hard to win every home match that they have left, especially considering that the home matches RSL is going to be a significant challenge. Houston, there is always some chaos
Yep.
magic thrown into that.
We'll get there.
Colorado will be Colorado, but this Vancouver one being the first one of those 4 remaining home matches,
Mhm.
it feels to me like there are additional resources, there's additional risk that'll be put on the line to make sure that is 3 points at home.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I could probably be talked into an Austin win. I'm gonna hold it to a draw right now, just to kind of see where
Yeah.
our totals end up. But yeah, I mean that is one where, yeah, if Austin ekes out a win, I'm not entirely surprised in the way that I would be with some of these other ones. Okay. So at Toronto, that is September 14th. I think there's a little international break in there somewhere, right? They're not going to play for 2 weeks, but it's two Canadian teams in a row. It's just 2 weeks apart, and that is at Toronto. And because Toronto has been better than expected this year and actually looking really good because they have some pretty threatening offensive players, and because it is such a distance to travel and they've never been there before, and that can be a pretty intimidating stadium, I'm calling it a draw. But you were also
I'm
calling
gonna
that a win?
I'm calling that a win because Bernardeschi's hair is an absolute catastrophe.
Well, yeah, yeah,
And
that's true.
and and yeah, for no other reason, Austin has to beat Bernardeschi's ridiculously stupid looking hair. Now, the distance for travel is one thing. The defeat Austin gave Toronto when they came to Austin last year is something that's in the back of my head. They weren't in the kind of run of form that they are in now. They've worked out some of their personnel stuff and some of their vibe stuff that were an issue for a while. I hate their coach. He's terrible. He's the worst. I will never forgive him for the horrible things he was shouting to his players during the Canada Cuba match
Yeah,
that I went
yeah.
to
I
out in
understand
Houston.
that. Yeah.
What a giant piece of crap. I dislike the man, and I hope that Austin absolutely clatter his team
Yeah.
for multiple reasons, but one of them just being that it will be, again, large traveling contingent of fans expected, like for Nashville. Feels to me like the lead in for the really crucial September games is that they've got to be trying for a win every time, but they want 3 points out of all three of those first 3 games
Of course.
so that the much more difficult September and October stretch is something that they can survive.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So John Herdman, I think he's a great coach, maybe a horrible human being, as you witnessed firsthand.
Look,
Yeah.
who knows what part of the Canadian drone spying program he was a part of?
Right.
What part of Canada's soccer CIA drone striking kind of stuff he was in for? I don't know. Who's to say? Who's to say what criminal intrigue their coach could be involved in? He could be up on charges. He could be suspended by the time this match happens.
Right. That's intense. All right. So let's go ahead. So at this point, I have them 36 points and
Mhm.
teetering on the edge. You have them 40 points, looking pretty good, right? So looking like all they need is 5 more points to get to that Thomas Rongen line. So let's compare some notes. All right. So LAFC, September 18th, they're traveling again to BMO Stadium, a place where in their last 3 matches, they have lost by a combined score of 8-0. I think that continues. I don't think they win that game. I don't think they draw that game. I think they lose and lose fairly substantially, even though there might be a little bit of pre-Open Cup final rotation going on.
Some rotation, I think, is guaranteed because it's midweek.
Mhm.
I yeah, I'm gonna make the dangerous wager that Wolf actually made a tactical move
Mhm.
with intending to run not the version of the lineup that was ideal against LAFC in Leagues Cup, and will run a different lineup, different formation against them
Mhm.
in league play
Okay.
against a rotated LAFC squad, catching Chirundolo on the back foot,
Okay.
which frankly, on the points that LAFC are on, LAFC will be fine with,
Mhm.
and shock win midweek against
Really?
LAFC.
Really? Okay.
Shock win.
So
Shock win.
you have them up to 43 points at this stage.
Yep.
Things are looking pretty good.
And looking pretty good, feeling pretty good.
4 straight wins. This is pretty
Four
optimistic.
straight wins. Four straight wins. And not out of optimism, out of absolute chaos observation.
Okay.
That it feels to me like, again, this is where the season is actually beginning, and the league's writers room is not going to like this. Andrew Wiebe is not going to like this. Lots of people are not going to like this because it doesn't conform to the way that things are supposed to go. And I'm not even saying that what I'm saying is likely. I'm saying it is not likely, and that's precisely why I want to believe that it'll be this interesting. I
Is
just
it
don't
fan
want to be
fiction?
bored. No, it's not fan fiction. If it were fan fiction, I'd be talking about the boys getting from the second team getting their championship rings polished together and getting pedicures or something like that. No, this is straight up prognostication, man. And people laughed, and I said they beat both Mexican teams and get out of the group stage. And who was
Right.
right? I was
You
right the
were
one
right.
time.
You were right. You were right. You were right about Mazatlan too, of course. All right,
Yep.
let's go ahead. So Houston, hosting Houston on the 21st. I have that as a win because it's Houston at home. They tend to win
Uh-huh.
those. I feel like obviously there's not a Copa Tejas to play for, but I still think that they get it done. Houston does not like coming to Austin, and I think that continues. I still think that there's enough. And I feel like at this point, Bukari is really going to be firing. And yeah, I have a good feeling about that one. What about
Yeah,
you?
I see a crying, weeping, inconsolable Buka hat trick scenes, absolute scenes. It'll be the Copa Tejas second place match, even though Houston is mathematically eliminated from even that. Copa Tejas dos, that, yeah, it got to be a win.
Okay. All right. So you have them over the wrong in line at this point now at 46 points. I have them at 39. So the next game is another home game the next week. That is against RSL. Of course, yeah, this is another kind of situation where Austin much better at home than on the road historically against this team, but I just think RSL's got too much. I have this down as a loss as well.
I want to tend toward what you're saying there, but also I have to go with the momentum that I'm prognosticating and
Mhm.
call it a draw, not a
Okay.
win against RSL.
So
I think that
the 5 game win streak ends here.
it it could end, and it
Okay.
could be a 6 game win streak. But I think it's more likely that that game draws
Mhm.
because you run out of gas in the tank at some point,
Yeah.
and you got to do some rotation. Which, hey, they actually have a lineup that they can rotate now.
Right.
What a bizarre luxury that we're still not used to. Yeah, I think if it doesn't end there, it'll end on October 2nd at Portland in the very draw that you predict. I'm thinking the same thing there.
Okay, so we have draws for Portland. So Chicho running wild and free doesn't necessarily scare you to the level that you think Austin's going to lose.
If what I'm calling is a 5 game win streak going into it,
Mhm.
I feel like Austin being able to neutralize Chicho to an extent If he's
Mhm.
not, I don't know, he might be out injured going as hard as he's been going. I feel like if I'm predicting that run of form,
Mhm.
which boy, will all of these predictions look completely wrong if those first couple of games don't go right.
Yeah.
I've got to feel like they can at least pull out a draw. The absolute craziest thing that nobody thinks is possible, that I think is actually possible, but is entirely based on momentum, is that they could pull out a win against RSL at home if they've got the right momentum going into it, not if they're coming out of this losing most of these matches, winning maybe one. I don't see them as being able to win that game unless they are high on something totally
Okay.
legal.
All right. Portland is in eighth right now. So this could be, depending on kind of what Minnesota does, this could be one of the kind of make or break playoff matches in terms of who gets in, who gets out. We both have these as draws. I do think at Portland, that's a particularly difficult place to play.
It
Vander's
really
been
is.
great this season. Yeah, Portland has been up and down, but yeah, if it goes to any kind of tiebreaker with Portland and Austin or Minnesota and Austin, Austin's at a disadvantage against both those teams right now. So a win would definitely be something preferable, and that's something that I think Austin will really be gunning for at this stage of the season, just because in my grimmer view, they absolutely have to have some kind of result here. For yours at this point, it's just trying to get out of, based on these numbers, get out of this the 8-9 plan games and get into quote
Yeah.
unquote the real playoffs. But you have this as a draw.
I have it
As
as
a
a
draw.
draw. I have it as a draw. Providence Park in the fall is a fortress. It
Mm,
is tough to come out of there with points. And unlike last season, Austin is not going there with notorious timber poison Will Bruin, who is the
right.
bane of many a Portland fan's existence
Mm,
for snatching win points out of their mouths at the death. He directly contributed to that draw last season in Portland that I was there for. And I think just because that is a tough place to go and play, and because even under Phil Neville of all people, they are managing to do pretty good stuff. I see it as a difficult thing, but I'm going to swing back around with it when we get to the end of this, a wilder, crazier thing that nobody's going to believe.
yep.
But I'll keep that for the end.
Gotcha. Okay. So at LA, last road game of the year, I have this as a loss.
The Joseph Paintsil Cup, the Paintsil Bukhari Cup. They suddenly get beset on by injuries and drop the run of form that they got. I don't see how that isn't a loss. Even with a big head of steam, with a big momentum, late season
Mhm.
run of form from Austin, Galaxy has just been too good.
Okay. And then so that brings us to decision day. And kind of the scenario that I've got is Austin on 40 points. They need a win. They need help to get into the playoffs. They need results to go their way. Minnesota is playing St. Louis at home. So, again, you probably figured that Minnesota is going to get something out of that. But if Roman Berkey has a good day and they get some magic together, maybe you get a Minnesota loss coupled with an Austin win, and Austin sneaks into the playoffs past Minnesota, assuming that they're still going to be kind of 9-10 at that point. So I have that as a win. I have them finishing, as I said, 43 points, going 3-3-3 down the stretch. What do you have?
Absolute win. Even if they lose the eight preceding games, that one's one that they've got to win for face saving alone,
Okay.
if nothing else.
So you have them going 6 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws to close out the season. They would be on 51 points. So that kind of Josh Wolf formula of 2 at home, 1 on the road would get you, if they played at that rate, that would get you 51 points. So essentially you have them achieving that Wolfian dream. And I haven't done the home road breakout on this necessarily to see if it's exactly 2 points at home and exactly 1 point on the road, but the averages all kind of work out to that. In your scenario, definitely they'd make the playoffs, probably as a 4 or 5. Based on last year's total, I have Austin finishing in 10th, which is probably the worst possible outcome. Depending on what you want, right?
Yeah, and where my head's at on all this is that I don't think that your math and your prognostication is out of the question or unlikely or anything like that.
Mhm.
I just want something interesting to watch, and
Yeah,
the
sure.
interesting version of the back chunk of this season is a lot of surprises.
Mhm.
The biggest surprise, and this is the thing I was saving for the end, is 8
Okay.
wins, 1 draw. If in these 9 games, they win 8 of them and draw against just Galaxy or just
Mhm.
LAFC or just
Mhm.
Portland, that is the kind of season narrative defying storyline that the fan base has been needing and wanting. And to be clear, isn't me going, "Oh, I just want the team to win all the time." Is something of an electroshock to the heart that the community needs, the people that have been following this team for 4 years need, and that electricity is some of what we could have gotten out of that Leagues Cup stuff if everybody had actually been paying attention to it or caring about it. At the same time, the people who were at those games,
Mhm.
absolutely electric and
Sure.
absolute scenes, but that was in isolation in a cup tournament that some people in the fan base were just plain not paying attention to and didn't care about.
Mhm.
And some people, look, it just fell during a time when people weren't paying attention. But everybody's going to be paying attention to the last 9 games of the season. And Josh Wolf surprising a lot of people is something that people need, not for his sake, but for the sake of the story of the team.
Right.
And they've got the bodies, they've got the health, they don't have some of the really weird locker room vibes and dynamics that some other teams have,
Mhm.
where they've got one clear superstar mega money dude who just keeps to himself, that we see in some cases across the league, or cases where there are a couple of DPs that are like dueling for who's the cock of the rock. This is a locker room that gets along pretty well and that
Mhm.
has
Sure.
solid leadership spread across it. And thank God they finally put the armband back on Alex Ring, because now they're operating like a team again,
Mhm. Yep.
bizarrely enough.
Yep.
I
So
think I think it's possible. Is it plausible? Maybe not,
yeah.
but it's totally possible.
Okay, in your rosiest scenario where there's only a single draw and 8 wins, that gets them to 56 points. St. Louis won the West last year with 56 points.
Uh,
I
you
think it
know,
takes more this year, probably, given where LAFC and Galaxy and even RSL are right now, but that would be a really dramatic turnaround in your scenario.
what I'm saying is that's what would excite me the most.
Sure.
And I think it is possible. I don't think it's
Okay.
out of the realm
Right.
of possibility. Um, but boy, is it unlikely. But
Mhm.
the fact that it is that unlikely is what makes it so much juicier to me. And some breaking news literally just hit the inbox
Hmm.
60 seconds ago, Phil. Austin FC acquires $1,075,000 in general allocation money. And so, in a trade with Atlanta for
What?
a 2024 international roster slot, to
That's a
achieve roster compliance,
lot.
Austin bought down the designated player contract of midfielder Alex Ring, using a portion of the additional 1 million GAM made available from the U22 initiative player model decision for 2024. Ring will continue to earn the same salary.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
I was wondering,
so
oh, this is amazing. Yeah, because I was thinking maybe they've already done this because, yeah, now you do have to, as I talked about in another part of the mailbag, that you have to now declare what your roster makeup is, like it was a college
uh-huh.
major. You either have to be 3 DPs and 3 U22s or 2 DPs, 4 U22s, and tons of GAM.
Yeah.
Yeah, that,
And since we're
okay.
still in the mailbag,
All right.
this is why I wanted to break this literally as it dropped in, because
Well, I got something to write
I knew we got
after.
to,
Okay. All
hey,
right.
look, got to declare a major, Phil.
But also, this is interesting. So they kicked over an international roster slot to Atlanta. Any kind of like last minute free agent international signing that they might get is probably not happening now because they would have probably also needed that unless, of course, they get rid of an international player like a Vicenen or, yeah, I guess it would be a Vicenen if you're talking about center backs that could possibly go who are internationals.
Yeah, and we've got some transfer stuff to talk about in
Yeah.
a bit, or who knows, I might get juggled a little
Momentarily,
bit
yeah, but let's
momentarily.
wow, that's so one more thing I wanted to get to on projecting the future. Okay, let's take my kind of bleak, didn't quite make it scenario, right? Let's say
Yeah,
43 points, get you 10th place, same as last year. They missed the playoffs. Is Wolf out at that point? Does Roto say, yeah, we needed to make the playoffs this year? Josh didn't do it. Thank you for your service. And then maybe Josh gets hired at Chicago or something, which is going to have a new
I
sporting director. And
yeah,
they probably don't want to have Frank Klopas be an interim head coach forever.
I mean,
So
I take Burrell at his word, and he said the
mhm,
playoffs are the line. I don't see any reason to assume that he is not going to stick to that.
no,
And Wolf himself has said the playoffs are the line. We've got to make the playoffs,
right.
and nothing like your job really being on the line
Mhm.
to have you motivated to make it happen by any means necessary.
Yeah. In my
And
scenario, they go 1-2-1 in the last four. So
yeah,
down the stretch where it
uh,
matters, they just can't get it done in.
they missed the playoffs. I don't know what excuses one could spin up. I saw
Mhm.
Burrell's face after that loss away in Dallas that lost Copa Tejas. That was a not happy man. And I don't think that he goes into this thinking that they should be winning every game, but I believe he saw that as a win that got away from them in absolutely inexcusable fashion.
Mhm.
He looked absolutely furious. 1,000 yard stare.
Mhm.
I expect the exact same thing if the team missed the playoffs in 10th.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. All right, yeah, before we wrap up here, because now I got stuff to write. Things going on, exciting things happening. All right, so basically looking over the transfer window, we didn't get any late players in. Josh had talked about one or two players in the works, possibly towards the end of the transfer window. If that did turn out to be Peter Grogan, that is like not necessarily maybe what we were expecting at the press conference, but again, we've got Bukari, we've got Dessler, we've got Svatak. I would say overall a pretty successful transfer window. You've got three
Yeah.
locked on starters for the next 3.5 seasons plus the option year. I expect that they're gonna be permanent fixtures at those spots, barring occasional rotation. Dessler, like you said, he already looks like he's been there for a while. Svatak, I'm pretty confident in, kind of based on just what he's done and doing what he's done at the Euros. And then Bukari is the wild card, but there are flashes that we've seen, especially in that last game against LAFC, where if he can put things together and get the chemistry and get the timing, really good things could happen. But still, again, I'd like to
Yeah.
see that first goal and that first assist before I get supercharged about what he's doing, but you can definitely see the potential there. So
I feel like that happens against Nashville. I feel like that's when we get that. And
I hope so.
you know, the thing with Osman is finally all that verticality that Josh has always wanted.
Mhm.
He's between him and Obi, he's
Yep.
got it on both sides.
Mhm.
He's got it. Now
Yep.
use it.
Right. Yeah. And also, yeah, make sure that you have Driussi making the kind of timed runs where he can take advantage of those things. Make sure that you've
Hmm.
got Zardes, if he's going to be getting more starts, at least occupying center backs. If you're going to give Rubio more of a run out, hopefully able to find some form. Because again, I was really optimistic at the start of the season. I've been less so since then. Striker's still the prime need area remaining for this team, but we've seen other players able to score. We've seen them been able to engineer goals through a lot of their, central midfield play. Yeah, I think it's coming together. Again, I don't know that it's coming together into 6 wins out of 9 form remaining in the season. But if it is, again, yeah, like how much Bukhari catches fire, I think is a lot of what's going to dictate do they make the playoffs or not. Not to put the pressure on him, but
Yeah.
I do think his performances are going to be key in terms of what they can get out of some of these games. And yeah, they're going to win a few for sure. Like I think their
Hmm.
baseline is they're going to get out of these 27, I would say like 9, 10 as a baseline, but they
Yeah.
they really need to get 14 and maybe 16, 17 to be absolutely safe.
Yeah. We can pundit all we want about how good the transfer window was. It entirely comes down to how well this designated player move actually performs for them.
Mhm.
In the way that Burrell has talked about somebody with the designated player tag, the way they've got to perform definitely was not what they got out of Rigoni. All of that weight is on the shoulders of Bukhari. And I don't doubt that we're going to see it out of him. Like he is the type of player that has shown that kind of quality and that kind of form. And the biggest surprise to me this fall would be if we don't see that kind of run of form out of him.
Again, though, like we thought with Rigoni too, that we're beginning to see some signs. There's a really great ball that he just whipped in across the face of goal. If he can just get another player on the end of that, he's going to be something. But I do think that also that Bukhari is an entirely different player from Rigoni. Rigoni, I
Oh,
saw at
entirely.
the outset as a kind of baby I can fix you situation,
Yeah.
whereas Bukari is a player that is absolutely ready to become an MLS star after really good run in Europe.
Yeah, I see you're going to see Bukari in those highlighted tiles on the season pass promotion,
Right.
in videos and everything.
Mhm.
He is the kind of playmaker that is going to give the MLS video team in New York something to work with.
Exactly. All right. I think that brings us to the end. Any kind of last things that you need to leave the people with?
Hey, if you love soccer and you already have a Paramount Plus subscription, you can follow my beloved Inter Milan and also other teams. But also, as of now, you can watch all EFL Championship, League One, and League Two, as well as the Carabao Cup, because CBS Sports picked up the rights to all that. So if you want to watch Wrexham, you can watch pretty much all of Wrexham's games if you already have a Paramount Plus subscription for Champions League, for Serie A, for whatever else. Just a hot tip, if you're looking for more soccer to watch, you can watch the Welsh Dragons.
And that is not a sponsor read, but that is what a sponsor read could sound like if you were interested in sponsoring the show.
It almost like that's the kind of thing that I know how to do. I love promoting things that I like, and I like Paramount Plus. Too bad they're not spending money on podcasts.
Right. Yeah, for sure. All right. That brings us to the end. Thanks so much. We are back on a regular schedule, I believe, after the Leagues Cup hiatus. We'll get you back next week in advance of the game against Nashville and let you know what Josh Wolf said, because he's going to have to talk to us again between now and then just figuring out everything else in this push to the playoffs, which is going to consume our lives for the next 2 months.
Well, I guess I do have one last thing, Phil.
Okay.
Prognosticate this. Who is Austin's closed door opponent going to be, since it's not going to be NYCFC?
I think it's the Fire. I was thinking, okay, who's an Eastern Conference opponent who Austin hasn't really had to play lately, because they played an Open Cup last year. Like Toronto, they have to play in a little bit. NYCFC, they just played, and they're obviously still in Leagues Cup. I know that obviously Wolf and Klopas have a good relationship, and they've been sitting idle for a while. So yeah, that's my guess, is that it's going to be Spider. I have no knowledge,
that feels
but
unimpeachable.
Yeah,
that feels unimpeachable. It isn't going to be Miami. It isn't going to be Orlando. Definitely isn't going to be Orlando, aka the Aztecs. Charlotte, they just played. Atlanta, nope. Yeah, I think you got it, man. I think it's going to be the Fire.
Okay, we shall see. We'll see if anything leaks out and let you know next week.
Leaks Cup. There's Leagues Cup and Leaks Cup.
God. All right.
Where's Phil? He usually starts this off.
He's teaching in San Antonio today. Colby, go ahead and start us off.